You can't keep birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from building a nest on it. What does that have to do with charting a new course for your family legacy? We'll get into that in episode 26 of Motherhood Unmasked. This is Motherhood Unmasked, the podcast for real talk about the challenges moms face. I'm your host, Vanessa Harris, but you are the hero. I'm grateful to connect with you today. Hey there, Mama Bear. This is Vanessa with compassion, candor, and clarity for you, the mom tired of pretending you're never overwhelmed by it all. I get you, and I'm so glad you're here. So, last episode we talked about swords and slaying things like harmful habits running down family trees. You may know them as generational curses, but if that's too spooky or absurd to you, think of them as dysfunctional family dynamics. If you missed episode 25, make sure you listen because this episode is the second half of the conversation, if you will. Because there's no such thing as stopping one thing if you're not replacing it with something else. Have you heard the parable about an impure spirit leaving a person but circling back to see if it can set up shop in that same person again? And if they find it nice and tidy but empty, that's exactly what it will do. It will come back up in there and bring some other nasty characters with it. The same goes for you when you've done the work to 1, diagnose, and 2, dismiss mindsets and beliefs that held you and your loved ones hostage for decades. You need that third step to dedicate your mind to a new way of thinking, to set your mind on thoughts that lead to where you want to go instead of where you've been. Or else you'll just set yourself up to be in a bad way worse than before. And while prayer and counseling can play a big part in charting a new course to move your family forward, no one can think your thoughts for you. There are some decisions only you can make and actions that you can take. When you did your homework from episode 25, you found the false narrative that's been swirling over your family's heads for generations. Lies you've believed about yourself and members of your family, and those thoughts have made quite the nest in your mind, opening you up to things like anger and bitterness and depression. But once you toss that narrative out, you need a new script playing in your mind, one full of life-giving thoughts. My script contains meditations and declarations based on God's word because I need to fix my thoughts on what's true about God, what's honoring of myself and others, and what's just plain old worthwhile to think. And the Bible ticks all those boxes for me. But the reality is, if you know better but don't do better, if you expose the lies but don't replace them with truth, the shame associated with that sinks your family deeper into the pit you're looking to climb out of. And that brings us to the segment of the show called Homework, the work a woman does to build her home and family. This week's homework involves the questions I mentioned in the last episode. If you didn't get them, it's because you're not on my email list, but that's an easy fix. Just sign up at vinelifefaith.com/podcast. There are 7 questions, and one of them is, what do you have to believe different to be different? And if you haven't done so yet, I recommend sitting with that question this week and beyond. Way beyond, really, because it's not a moment in time question. It's a lifelong question. That's something that we're always going to be asking ourselves. How do we believe different to have and to become what we want to be? But in terms of behavior, I'm reminded of something Pastor Joseph Prince out of Singapore says all the time. Right believing leads to right living. And it's so true because every action starts with a thought. So the script you allow to nest in your mind doesn't just stay there. It works its way into your heart, and you do what's in your heart to do. We all do. But this week, I challenge you to think about what you're thinking about, the thoughts behind your actions. Find the ones that don't serve you well and decide what thoughts you need to replace them with. And when you decide, declare them. Say them. And since you have what you say them often. I'm rooting for you, and I pray your courage as you tackle family dynamics working against the legacy you want for your family. And as you do, know that I'm doing the same. If you need more encouragement, I talk about this more in the January article on my blog at vinelifefaith.com. And if you'd like a copy of those questions I mentioned earlier, questions to help you identify and slay the cycles in your family, you can get your copy, my treat, by connecting with me. Just click the podcast tab on the website. And as you get busy slaying cycles and changing mindsets, please remember, when it comes to you being the mother of your children, you are the woman for the job. Take care. Thanks so much for joining me today. This podcast only works if I'm serving you well. So if you have any questions or ideas for topics that you would like me to cover, please let me know. You can leave me a message by heading over to vinelifefaith.com and clicking on the podcast tab. That's vinelifefaith.com/podcast. Motherhood Unmasked is brought to you by Vine Life Faith, where we're breaking negative cycles and building healthy community through connection with Christ. vinelifefaith.com.